Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third day of the Earth Week online dynamic lunch speaker series. We are here today on the ancestral, unceded, and currently occupied territory of the Syilx people. The Syilx people have stewarded the land for thousands upon thousands of years, and in the span of just merely 200 years, settlers have completely changed the landscape and the worldview. We have got to change our mindset. We have got to change the way we pollute. We've got to change the way we commute, which ties into today. And, let's all aim to do a much better job of getting back to stewarding the land and taking care of the planet. I'm delighted to introduce my two speakers today. Kirsten is a seasoned researcher, facilitator, and community organizer. She advocated for free and improved transit in Ottawa before moving to Kelowna and helping to found the Okanagan Transit Alliance. She recently completed her master's at UBCO in community engagement, social change, and equity. And I was present during the defense of the thesis, and Kirsten absolutely knocked it out of the park. So congratulations, Kirsten. With more than 2 decades of professional experience as a transportation engineer, consultant, and municipal government employee, Peter's got a wide range of local, national, and international experience. He's a former president for the Canadian Institute of Transportation Engineers, a former transportation and mobility manager with the City of Kelowna, and narrowly missed out on a Kelowna City Council seat in 2022. Simply put, he makes communities more vibrant, safer, greener, healthier, and accessible to people of all ages and abilities. He volunteers for several committees, including the Okanagan Transit Alliance Executive, as a technical strategic advisor. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kirsten and Peter. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll kick things off. So today we're talking about how transit can be a transformative solution for climate. So we'll talk about the different ways that improved public transit can impact communities, different visions that we have for how transit could be improved right here in Kelowna. And we're also going to talk about the transit reality. So what situation are we in now? Where are we starting from? What are some of the barriers that we're up against when we're thinking about a more inspiring vision for our transit future? So me and Peter both work with the Okanagan Transit Alliance, which is a grassroots movement for better transit across the Okanagan. A lot of our members, admittedly based in Kelowna, so we're pretty Kelowna focused right now, but our vision is to support and advocate for solutions all across the Okanagan region. And we envision a publicly managed transit system that is safe, sustainable, accessible, and community-driven, and that will meet the transportation needs of this growing region. So that's the vision that keeps the Okanagan Transit Alliance moving forward. So we're going to start this conversation by framing a bit of the transit present. So what is the reality right now? What's the structure? What are the key pieces of legislation that are impacting transit decisions in our community? I want to start by outlining the actual structure of transit because I think it can be pretty confusing, even for a lot of us who have been looking at this for a while. It's hard to keep track of these, there's a lot of overlapping jurisdictions and weird structures in place that can make it feel a bit difficult to make a difference in these systems. So the actual route planning and half of the funding, approximately, this is a bit of a simplification, but approximately half of the funding for a transit system comes from BC Transit. The approval of the transit, the route planning, and the other half of the funding comes from the cities, the City of Kelowna, different cities across, the municipalities cover the other half of the funding. The day-to-day management of the transit system, so hiring drivers, training them, making sure buses are on the road, that comes from a private party. So right now, that portion of the transit management is contracted out to a France-based international called Transdev. They operate a lot of the transit contracts in BC, but in Penticton, it's a local company. So it varies a bit by municipality and by area, but either way, it's contracted out to a third party. So that's the structure. For some of the more technical, the Transportation Master Plan, Bill 44, I'm passing it to Peter, our resident transit expert.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Kirsten. So some of the key lines that you may or may not have heard in relation to the city's transportation master plan over the last couple of years. It was adopted in early 2022, and so this actually sets the stage for us for the next 20 plus years, really, for how the city envisions our growth to occur, and particularly on the transportation side, where a whole bunch of the investment shall be going. So you may have heard some of the taglines out in the media about this, and this is what the city always loves to purport: is we're going to double transit ridership, we're going to quadruple the walk active transportation trips that are occurring in the city, so walking, biking, that sort of thing. And we're going to reduce the driving distance by 20% per person over the course of the next 20 years. And Tracy, thanks for clarifying that this is just specific to the city of Kelowna. As Kirsten said, we do tend to be a little bit Kelowna-centric, but a lot of the same types of principles and goals are set in a whole bunch of the other communities across the Okanagan. I will come to that in a little bit and focus in on Kelowna specifically. But first, the other sort of key thing that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention is that's been recently in the news. You may have heard the provincial government basically forced municipalities to adopt some completely revised planning options through Bills 44 and 47. Kelowna was very much in the forefront of adopting it quickly, while many other municipalities across the province are actually pushing back and saying, this isn't working very well. We don't want to adopt this the way that the legislation has forced us to. What essentially those bills do is to try and increase density within our cities and built environments. You've probably heard of a single family home now having the potential to have up to 4 to 6 units, depending on the size of the lot, without having to go through rezoning. It's been a blanket zone. And along with this, in the other bill, there's also a definition of transit hubs. And so within 400 meters of those transit hubs, up to 10 stories is permitted without having to go through rezoning. Or should say it's been designated now without any study. And now I have to move into Mr. Doom and Gloom portion of this. Lucky Kirsten gets to be the smiling face and the guiding light at the end of this, but I get to be Mr. Doom and Gloom for a bit. So the issue with these two bills is that there's quite the potential to actually stunt the growth of transit, particularly in all of the areas outside of the transit hubs. And there's some very odd designations within the bills even themselves, which are curious and a little bit puzzling. You know, for instance, Queensway Transit Hub in downtown Kelowna, which is the main transit hub, is not actually listed as a transit hub in the legislation. Next slide. I'll jump back to the transportation master plan, and this is a bit of a rehash from some stuff from a couple of years ago. But here is kind of the stage that we are looking at right now. Okay, on the left-hand side of the screen, you see Kelowna's transportation master plan. On the right-hand side, you see BC Province's Clean BC Roadmap to 2030. The reality is that the vision and all those great taglines that I talked about a little bit earlier on are really almost just taglines. They make it sound great, but when you actually dig into the bones of the various planning documents that have come together, including the ones that make the transportation master plan, the reality is much different. So, for instance, the vision was that 20% of the average distance driven in 2040 drops by 20%. Or sorry, the average distance driven in 2040 drops by 20%. The reality is that the total distance driven using vehicle trips is actually going to increase over 2020 numbers by 10%. Okay, so that means that our transportation greenhouse gas emissions, our congestion are all going to increase by the same amount. Okay, whereas the 2030 target for Clean BC actually is calling for a 25% reduction. So 10 years sooner, we want more. Well, the province has set out a target to have average distance driven to be 5% more, or the reduction to be 5% more, and the city's documents and plans just simply don't reflect that provincial legislation right now. Next slide, please. Okay, mode shift targets. I talked about some of those great things that sound wonderful. We want to double transit usage, and we want to quadruple biking and walking as an option. Okay, the Clean BC roadmap calls for, again in 2030, a 70% auto mode share, a 60% auto mode share by 2040, and a 50% auto mode share by 2050. Now, where are all of these other trips going to? They're supposedly going to walking and biking and transit trips. Okay, unfortunately, all of our planning documents and the transportation master plan will not achieve even the latest goal, or okay, they won't achieve any of the goals of Clean BC. Okay, let's not dance around the issue. In 2040, Kelowna is calling for, at best, if they can double transit usage and quadruple biking usage and walking usage, to a maximum 75% auto share. Okay, we're just not anywhere close to meeting provincial targets. Okay, is the bottom line of this slide. So that vision sounds great, but the reality is unfortunately quite the opposite. Next slide, please. Okay, this is really reflected and rooted in where all of the funding is going to go. So you can see in the two green boxes that you've got transit, a significant increase in transit spending, a significant increase in percentage spending for walking and biking. Okay, and so for doubling the mode share, the envisionment was that we're going to have to increase transit spending by 70%. Okay. In the red box, you can really see that there is a 225% increase in road widening and road improvements. Okay. And the question is that, well, who is this actually really benefiting at the end of the day? Okay. So one thing to keep in mind as you think about calls for action, we really need to overhaul our planning and transportation master plan documents to try and reprioritize our spending. Okay, and the reality is, next slide, please, Kirsten, that this is changing. This is not changing. In fact, it's being further reinforced by our current city council. Okay, back in February, the mayor had a long speech for the city's annual address, talking about successes and challenges, and within the text there, that's in big font on the right-hand side, you'll see we're really prioritizing transportation. Okay, we're gonna put $100 million worth of money into capacity building and reducing congestion on our networks, and so this is almost entirely focused on road improvement projects. It is unfortunate that the pivot of this council has been to actually take money away from walking and biking and from transit to put towards road improvement projects. Okay. So Mr. Doom and Gloom is over. That sets the stage a little bit for why the Okanagan Transit Alliance has formed and why we are looking to try and make some major changes. So Kirsten, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, so that's where we're at, right? We're living in a region that is very car centric and plans to continue to be very car centric, whether you're living here trying to get to work, if you're a student trying to get to school, if you're a tourist coming to town, trying to get between cities in the Okanagan. It's very, very challenging to rely on transit. And so the Okanagan Transit Alliance has 4 specific goals that they're very community driven. So this was all created out of public town halls, engagement processes, and we've selected 4 goals that we're advocating for the city to take on. But I also want to be clear, the Okanagan Transit Alliance is not the only organization working on transit, so there's lots of ways to get involved in this issue, but just sharing our vision for how we think we can switch from the reality we're in, the path we're on, to a different path, something more transformative and something that can actually make our city more accessible, more sustainable, all these great things. So some of the highlights of transit as a transformative climate solution. Investing in public transportation can create really good green jobs. So when people talk about green jobs, sometimes it's hard to know what exactly that means, but being a bus driver is a great green job. Part of the challenge right now, though, is that because our transit management is contracted out to those private companies, local transit drivers in the central and north Okanagan are paid on average $3 to $5 an hour less than comparable public transit systems. And they don't have pension plans. They're generally overworked, working a lot of overtime. So instead of having really good green jobs, we have these underpaid, more precarious jobs in our community. And so bringing transit back under public management can create additional local jobs by reinvesting the money. Instead of going to these private companies, it can be reinvested in local government or a local organization who could take over the work of TransDev, while also bringing equitable pay and other key benefits to the drivers and maintenance staff that keep buses running. This is one of the goals of the OTA, is we're advocating to get rid of the private management model, bring transit back under public control. So this is one of the ways to get involved in. I'm going to share links afterwards, but we have a petition and we have an open letter on this. So if this is a goal that you support, we'd love to have your name, your organization added to this call. Good public transportation is also key to having your city be accessible and equitable. And so, accessible in terms of financial access, accessible in terms of being able to just get around, right? Having a city that people can get to the farmer's market, they can get to the grocery store, they can go to work, they can go out in the evenings, and they can rely on their transit system to meet those needs. And also a system that is equitable. So people of all different abilities are able to rely on this transit system. One of the challenges, or one of the faults in our transit system right now, is that Handy Dart is not an equitable system, right? It's for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of ways it needs to be improved, but the number one request that BC Transit hears about how to improve Handy Dart is to have it run 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Because right now, Handy Dart doesn't run on Sundays or public holidays. Believe it or not, people with disabilities do still need to get out on weekends and have things to do and lives to live 365 days a year. So this is just a major inequity that this service isn't offered 365 days a year. The city of Kelowna is expanding Handy Dart service through taxis. So different, right now they offer Taxi Saver, which is discounted taxi fares. They're going to start offering fully covered taxi rides on Sundays with the hope of moving towards full Handy Dart coverage on Sundays. That's just the city of Kelowna. Right now, it's just taxis. There's more work to be done, but I do think it's important to celebrate when there's progress. So happy to see that happening. And the Okanagan Transit Alliance is also building benches and putting them at bus stops that don't have benches. Again, knowing that if you have limited mobility, even if just you don't want to stand and wait for the bus for 45 minutes, having a comfortable bench, a shaded area, a protected spot to wait for the bus can make a big difference. So if you're interested in supporting any of that work, we also have open letters, petitions, and you can donate to the bench building efforts because the wood can be a little pricey. Transportation is also the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the province. So if you're looking at how do we have an impact on GHGs, transportation is huge, and we need to shift our transportation from private on-demand transit at all times, so cars, right? We want to be able to go wherever, whenever, when I want, how I want in my car. We want to shift that to an effective and efficient and reliable shared transit system that can reduce GHG emissions. It's important to remember, like really driving it home here, this is not where we're headed, right? The city of Kelowna, the Okanagan region is headed towards continued car dependence, continuing to invest in roads, continuing to prioritize car transportation. Our goal is to shift that, and that's going to be a big lift, but it's something that can be done. So the OTA's goal is to maximize our current available service hours by developing frequent service in high density areas while making concrete plans to expand the number of available buses. Right now, the city of Kelowna is limited because our transit yard just cannot hold any more buses, or at least not many more. I'd say it's maybe we'd have some debate on whether it could hold a couple more, but we're limited by that. So they need to build a new transit yard, and that's underway, but it's been underway for a long, long time. So we need pressure on the city that this is a project that needs to be done. It needs to be done thoughtfully, and it needs to be done in a way that matches the city's long-term transit goals. While we're waiting for that transit yard to come in, there are ways to better and more efficiently prioritize the existing available buses. And so that looks like rapid transit in our busiest areas, increasing transit in our lower peak times. So increased service on weekends, increased service in the evenings is still possible with the buses we have available now. And even looking at transit on demand as a possibility for outlying areas to shift service into our busier downtown cores. So there are lots of ways to make the current system more efficient, more effective, more reliable, with the goal towards increasing our number of buses long term. But that requires investment, and right now that investment is going to roads. So we just completely need to shift the framing of the city. And public transit also is a great option to ease the cost of living crisis that so many people are feeling the brunt of. So Canadian households pay on average, this is from 2017, so it'd be much higher now, but almost $13,000 a year for transportation. It will be usually the second highest household expense after shelter. So after rent, your transportation options are going to be the biggest part of your budget. And people spend more on vehicles over a lifetime than they do on housing. So other analysis has showed that. So by easing the cost of transportation, by offering a reliable and affordable and accessible transportation system, we can make our community more affordable and more welcoming to lower income families. And so our goal with this, we're focusing on specifically transit access for teens, and the OTA's goal is to expand fare-free service. Right now it's 12 and under, you ride for free. We want to expand that to 18 and under. The city of Kelowna is going to meet on April 22nd, and they're having a vote on doing a study on the costs of fare-free transit for 18 and under municipally. The School District 23 recently endorsed supporting province-wide fare-free 18 and under. This is the goal, is we eventually want the different councils around the Okanagan to endorse province-wide fare-free 18 and under. Penticton is doing a pilot study for 3 years of fare-free 24 and under. So again, there's movement happening here. There's potential, there's momentum. The province is paying attention to this possibility of expanding fare-free 18 and under. So there are glimmers of hope. I do want to leave everyone feeling that, like, you know, we do have power. We do have the ability to influence these things when we act together. So it's exciting to see that there's some attention being paid to that. And our last thing is just thank you. You can learn more, join the Okanagan Transit Alliance, but I see there's great discussion happening in the chat that I've missed. So I just want to take a look at that. Okay. And there'll be lots of questions. So I'll talk about some of the stuff in the chat, but also I know there's questions. So Tracy, how do you want me to do this? Do you want me to look at the chat first, or do you want to open it to questions?
Yeah, you can have a look at the chat, but if you can just stop your screen sharing as well, that would be great. And then we're all able to look at each other.
Awesome. So I saw Lori, how did the city react to the gorilla benches? Surprisingly positively. Like, I know that it's kind of officially, I think that the response in the paper was like, this is fine. But when I talked to a staff behind the scenes, I'm not going to say his name, but he was basically like, this is awesome. And if the city tries to take these away, let me know and I'll make sure that that doesn't happen. So officially they have to say, well, I don't know about this, but unofficially they like it and they appreciate that that's getting done. So that's at least nice. I feel like it'd be pretty harsh to go in and take away a bench for people waiting at a bus stop. So I'm glad at least that they were okay with that.
No, because they put up benches and things with barriers so people don't lie on them. I mean, there's a lot of pushback to making things comfortable for people who are poor. It's
Totally.
just reality. In Penticton, we had a mayor who got people a bylaw that you couldn't sit on the curb. That was a couple of years ago. It made national news. I mean, it was really embarrassing. So, a bench like that is very comfortable.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And that's why we made them shorter at first, and then we started making them longer, because we're like, if someone could lie down on this, that's even better. Awesome. I'm seeing some debate about electric vehicles, which I think, Peter, you jumped into. Do you want to add anything on that?
No, but I actually, if not to put up on the spot, but I'm wondering if maybe like you can kind of jump in a little bit more on your thoughts as well on that, if you're willing, of course.
I actually have some comments, to be honest, because I did watch a zero carbon step code webinar with the co-president of the Canadian Home Builders Association. And obviously it's talking about energy use, and people start saying, well, oh my gosh, if we have an electric vehicle, you know, we're going to have to upgrade the house from 200 amps to 400 amps and all these different things. And he was very clear that there is a way to have demand management, and therefore, you know, you've got your EV plugged in, but then you decide you're going to run the dishwasher and the laundry. And with that system in place, what will happen is you will stop charging the electric vehicle. The load will go to the dishwasher or whatever it was I just mentioned. I don't have a dishwasher. And then once they're finished, it will switch back to the electric vehicle. And it's really a misnomer and misinformation that, you know, you've got to upgrade the electrical grid on your house if you're going to have more electric appliances and using electric forms of heating and cooling, like a heat pump. In addition, you know, some of these things are more energy efficient, so you will actually use less. So that argument of needing to be, oh, it uses a lot of energy is really debunked. And the main thrust of this is, if we have better transportation in place, you know, young people are not even going to buy a car to start with. We're not going to have necessarily 2 cars per household. My children don't even have a driver's license. They don't want one. They want to use transit. And that is what the youth are doing. And yeah, this is why transit is the biggest push on getting people to not use cars as much and not have as many cars.
Yeah, I think it's with climate, a lot of the answer is yes, and this and that, you know, let's do everything we can, but just, you know, we need great public transit to reduce the number of cars, stop expanding roads, not invest so much in our parking infrastructure, all of those good things. In North America, we still need vehicles. Where we have them, let's go electric and champion each other and get as many solutions in place as possible. Any other?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I was just going to jump in and say, in my mind, I don't think it's an and or solution. I think that electric vehicles do have their place, and you know, as some people have pointed out, the reality is that we are so car dependent that it will be very, very difficult to wean our populations away from that. You know, particularly in more rural areas. That being said, if you don't provide appropriate infrastructure for transit, walking, and biking, aka other alternatives to that, you will continue to perpetuate and grow this. So not just from an environmental perspective of emissions, but think about the environmental implications of having to build massive roadways or even narrow roadways, putting down that asphalt, taking out trees, doing those sorts of things. There still is an impact overall. And again, not to say that, you know, walking or biking don't also have impacts, because they do. The base amount of infrastructure that goes out is still something, but it's a heck of a lot less in terms of overall surface area, and accommodates many multiple times more people than traditional private vehicles do, irrespective of what the fuel source is.
Jamie, you've got your hand up there.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, I was just wondering, Peter, about what you're just talking about the city's focus on expanding roads here. I'm kind of peripheral to the conversation around transit. I jump in and help where I can, but like I feel like even I know, and I've known for a decade, that when you build more roads, it just gets filled up with private vehicles. And it doesn't alleviate any of the traffic congestion. So I'm curious what's going on in Kelowna City Council, that this is the priority rather than all these other, like everything that everybody's advocating for.
Well, okay, I will give you a bit of a snarky answer.
And this will be on YouTube.
You need to ask City Council what their thinking is. Because really, if you're asking me to kind of give an opinion about what they're thinking, I can give you my perspective or my insights as to what I think they're thinking, but it's not it's not straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So my perspective on it is that there is a small select group of lobbyists who continue to push for expanded roadway capacity, and there's often elements of, well, we're so far into the future for this sort of stuff, we need something now, and without taking sort of a holistic life cycle perspective on it. And, the squeaky wheels kind of get the grease. I think you also have to look at our council and say, we've had 6 of the 9 people, so 2/3, have been there for more than a decade plus. One who's a recent comeback that was on council, decades ago. The line of thinking that I'm hearing from them is very, very rooted in traditional 50s, 60s, and 70s thinking, planning methodologies, and it's very tough for them to sort through the noise, particularly when they have staff sometimes chirping in their ears saying, oh, this is okay, right? Oh, well, we're doubling transit trips, we're quadrupling walking and biking trips. Those sound great. They are great. Okay, if we are fortunate enough to achieve those, that is fantastic. But that is a small step in the reality of how it's being sold and messaged. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, Jamie. But to everybody in the group here today, I would encourage you to, if you want to know what council's thinking, write in and try and engage them, because I think you'll start to learn and see and form your own opinions about how council is actually engaging on all of these topics.
Thanks, Peter. I have comments to make, but I think I'll see what all the other questions are. I can't remember if it was Grace or Laurie who had the hand up first. Laurie, go ahead then, and then next Grace.
Thanks. I put a post in the chat about the Cities for Everyone webinar yesterday. It was really inspirational with the mayor of Bogota talking about how Bogota has a lot of slums and a lot of poor people, and buses, transportation, and outer pedestrian areas are public space that should be safe and accessible for everyone equally, whether you are poor or rich. And you are allowed to be on the road if you have no money, or on a $50 bike or a $50,000 car. And so what he said was that you should watch the video when it comes out. It's not posted yet. But what he said was they started bike highways and bike routes with parks, safe bike routes in the 1990s before Paris and New York and all sorts of other places. And the streets used to be full of cars parked everywhere, and they just put in bike lanes and pedestrian walkways, and the cars can't park. And he said, people say, but what do we do with our cars? And he said, it's not my problem. You bought a car, you put it somewhere. The streets are for people, and people need to get around, and buses are the way people need to get around. And they just increased ridership by having this BRT, where they have these big buses on their own routes beside bike paths, and they reduce the roads down to one lane. And the buses are way less expensive to run than all of the infrastructure for the cars. And so the cost goes down to the city, and the ridership goes up, and the pollution decreases, and the people have a way of getting around. It is a wonderful hour video. I highly recommend it. And sharing it with local leaders. I think he was the mayor of Bogota 3 times or something. And also that Strong Towns link that I shared. They do so much with local transportation and reducing roadways. And I like what they've done in Tracy's area in Kelowna with the planters separating the bike lane. So it's beautiful as well as safe. And that's a good thing that Kelowna has done. And increasing that and reducing the speed of the cars will get more people eventually to ditch their cars, park their cars, and ride the transit if the transit is available to them and really accessible. Because if people here, I know in Penticton, the youth way up on the hills on the edge of the town can't take a bus at all, because they would be walking 30, 45 minutes to get to a bus stop. And then they would have to wait for the bus and get in. So we do need on-demand little mini buses going around to pick up people in outlying areas to bring them to a hub. It's very hard if your city council is fossilized, except to say that it's going to reduce the cost, that the cost of building a better system reduces the ongoing cost to the city and makes the city healthier, happier, and safer for everybody.
And when you say fossilized, Laurie, you're talking about their thinking and their age, right?
No, it doesn't have to be age, just thinking.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Laurie.
On that note, Laurie, just wanted to look up a couple of quick facts. I'm quite familiar with the Transmilenio in Bogota. Very forward-thinking project. Many decades ago. Lots of other cities are starting to kind of pattern off of that. We've got lots of opportunities here to do just that. They, as of the end of 2021, they have almost 1,800 buses running on the system on 11 lines, and a ridership of over just over 500 million people a year. Okay, so from a carrying capacity, like they're carrying somewhere between 10 and 20 times the amount that a normal vehicle lane would be able to carry the number of people on. It truly transformational type system.
That's absolutely amazing. And I'm so glad, Laurie, that you put that in the chat, because I was not able to watch that yesterday. And I've heard about the Mayor of Bogota, so I'm going to share that in the follow-up email today.
Oh, good.
I'm going to ask Grace to unmute next, but after that, I'm going to give Desiree a chance. Desiree has been speaking about electric vehicles, which we're not really focusing so much on. This is more transit, but Desiree, if you want to say something after Grace, then feel free. Okay, Grace, go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. My whole concern is about the expansion of roads. Our roads are very damaging because we have to really look at, we're into a terrible drought, and many of the roads are by streams, and they interfere or they cover up the streams, and we're losing all our areas for riparian areas and to maintain and secure our water. And we have to really start pushing council that they can no longer do this. The Bogota is a good example of why we can't. We're in serious drought and we're in food security problems. The more roads you take, it's going to be the more problems with taking our earth and soil away. So this is really a very terrible situation. And I guess I'm pretty desperate because we're working also with watersheds, and Kelowna is going to be in big problems with what's happening to all the streams coming down to Okanagan Lake. And therefore, this transit thing needs to be looked at because this will only increase drought and those problems. So thank you very much.
So
Thanks.
regarding electric vehicles, Tracy, thanks for the opportunity. I'm really grateful to hear this conversation about the increase in transit and the work that's being done, because I think it's really important. Up until very recently, I myself thought that an electric vehicle would be a good option for myself. I don't drive very far. Generally, I'm driving within town. Seemed like it would be a pretty good solution. And as I started to do some research and actually inquired about purchasing a secondhand electric vehicle, I was dismayed to learn that there really is no market or no availability of replacement batteries for used electric vehicles. And so you've got maybe a 10-year-old vehicle, maybe a little more if you're lucky, where the battery itself, sure, can go to a solar farm and continue a good life and keep being productive, but you now have a car that doesn't go. And so I have really transitioned my own thinking back toward the active transport and public transportation side of the house. So I'm just really excited to hear this work that's being done and to look into getting more involved in that, and just totally agreeing that we need to shift away from our vehicle dependency. And if we can get our city council to kind of help us create a community where that works, then I think that's a good way to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Desiree. And just FYI, Okanagan Transit Alliance has monthly meetings, and we can share with everyone actually in the follow-up resource when the next meeting is. Mostly they're online. Every once in a while there's an in-meeting one, so it just makes it more accessible. And then, like I say, the occasional meeting is in person, and Kirsten has put the date in the chat here. Yeah, it's a really great group, and it's really encouraging to hear you say that you know, instead of the typical framing that people have, oh, the electric car is not going to work for me, I'm going to go back to a fossil fuel car. You're just like a breath of fresh air by saying, no, I'm going to focus on transportation and active transportation. So I'm so glad you spoke up. Yeah.
Can I jump in quick, Tracy? Okay, thanks. I want to address this too, because I'm actually at the point here where the one vehicle that I own is nearing the end of its ability to function. So I've been sort of thinking the same thing, and I'm really glad to hear that there are others that are kind of looking at this way. That said, you know, we're not in the territory in this region yet where, unless we are very conscious about our land use positioning of where we live, where we work, that going without a vehicle entirely is fully practical. It may be practical for a good chunk of the day, certainly for commuting. I have two kids. One of them plays hockey. We have biked to the rink before with hockey gear, and he's a goalie. But it's not always practical. Okay, so I would say, if you have to have a vehicle, an EV, definitely from the overall life cycle of a GHG emission, it's about half of what a gas-powered vehicle is today. So you're certainly doing something better if you do decide that you do need a vehicle. It's half, whereas, walking and biking are like a 50th to 100th of the GHG output.
And Laurie just put something in the chat, but took away what I was going to say, which is car share. If you don't need a car very often, use car share. If you've already got a car and you use a second car infrequently, again, that second car could be car share. Just getting away from actually having personal single occupancy vehicles and multiple single occupancy use vehicles within a household is going to make the change that we need. Wes was next.
Yeah, that was where I was going to go as well, because I have an electric bike. I gave my car away a year or two ago because I was not using it very much. Sometimes it would sit for a year. It was an awesome car, 20, 30 years old, on propane and blah, blah, blah. My expense is very low. But still, like was mentioned earlier, costs. We're now dealing with a world of affordability where a lot of people are in a lot of trouble, including governments. Where are they going to get big money to do different things? And Trudeau and conservatives and all kinds of governments can't, tackle our existing system, which is unfair, the corporate capitalist system, and all of that kind of thing. So and a lot of people are getting squeezed. So we just have to run to all the other active transportations mentioned. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. Well said. Catherine?
Yeah, hi. I was just going to say, I think our number one priority then is to push council to move from private to public. And if in moving to public, wouldn't they be eligible for grants from the provincial government for adaptation to electrical buses? So electrification, which is what the new push is, to try and electrify the buses. And wouldn't that save council and the people of this community so much money? And also it would be a valuable resource for us. And it could be a selling point for where you want to live, a place by a bus stop, so that you could use. And certainly my friends in Victoria don't own cars because they value the transportation in Victoria and use nothing but transit to go to and from work, to go shopping. And most of my friends would never think of owning a car in Victoria. So why can't we put that kind of an argument, and also the Bogota ideas that were brought forward to council, and especially Okanagan Transit, yourselves who are knowledgeable on this, bring this to council. Thank you.
Totally, Catherine. And I love the enthusiasm, and I love the idea, and I love the vision. I think part of the challenge that we hear, and Peter, you can back or let me know if you've heard this as well, is council saying that they can't electrify buses at the current transit yard. And so they're waiting on building that new transit yard, which keeps getting kicked down the road. So there's a lot of things that the city points to of like, we can't because. And so we're pushing them to move forward with that step so that they can continue to advance that. Also, a lot of the funding, I would say, often funding for electrifying bus infrastructure comes from federal grants, which they can definitely still access. So there is money out there. There just needs to be the excitement and the incentive to do it. The biggest problem, I don't think that the private management structure impacts their ability to access that funding, anything like that. What it does is it wastes some money. We're struggling to get the data right, but we know that, for example, because our drivers are underpaid, it's harder to keep drivers in the Okanagan, so they work more overtime. That costs a lot of money. They train drivers. That costs hundreds of thousands of years to train drivers who then leave for higher paying bus systems. So that's a waste of money. they end up going on strike for weeks and weeks at a time because this private company really wants to keep wages down. So they'll drag those out. That's a waste of money. And there's also a lot of evidence that these public-private models, they're not the best at delivering service. There's a lot of different ways that they're just not very efficient. And so the OTA argument is we could free up more funding for the system by getting rid of the public-private partnership model. So I love that. But the electrifying has its own challenges. So I think definitely something we can push for, and just keeping the city, like, we're paying attention and we want you to be moving towards this is something to put pressure on them for.
Thank you.
And I would ask, really, like, everyone on the call, write to mayor and council. We have got a $100 million infrastructure influx of money from the province. And the vast majority of it is going to either road expansion plans, one of which is going past Munson Pond, for goodness sakes. And, why isn't it going to the transit hub at the airport so that the buses then start going directly to the airport? You don't stop at UBCO and then wait around for a bus with your suitcases, maybe in the cold. Why not actually get that hub built so that the buses will go there? It's just an expansion for very, very few people instead of an expansion that benefits better and more frequent and more reliable transit. That's the exact choice that they've made. They have an option of funding a transit hub to an airport. How many big cities don't have direct transit from the airport to downtown without changing a bus? But we do. And we only have 2 buses actually from Kelowna itself that go to the airport. So, yeah.
Terrible bus service to the airport. I went on it and I was just blown away about it. And I don't know, Peter, if you're going to jump in, if there is consultants going to be working on this. I'm a little unclear on that, but we definitely need that. I mean, that's a no-brainer, and we ain't doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting with the airport. When I first moved here, that's 13 years ago now. There used to be a bus stop right outside the front door of the airport, and the city moved it about 250 meters away from the front door to replace it with a valet parking booth.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of exemplified things right there. You'd think that the airport, being a city entity, would have a little bit more clout in trying to work with the other departments of the city to facilitate that kind of stuff. I've had personal conversations with some of the airport staff out there that they're clamoring and crying for more transit use because a lot of their staff are lower wage. They have no ability to get there on the bus for early morning shifts, right? I mean, your security opens up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. All those check-in counters, that sort of stuff. And so I did see just recently that they had hired a couple of really high-priced consultants coming out of other parts of the country to advise them on what to do, when the reality is that all they need to do is go and talk to their cohorts and say, hey, we need to get some transit service out here, and how can we shift the hours to make that happen? Now, that being said, that starts to get into a little bit of what OTA's role is in organizing and orchestrating this, is that because of the way the system is set up, everybody can point fingers at one another and nobody can take responsibility for actually achieving that. Okay, the province sets a cap on the number of hours. The city is not, in theory, permitted to work outside of that. And they won't be funded for more. And even if the city wants to try and fund more directly, they're usually slapped down and told that that's not possible. So, everybody can just keep finger pointing and passing the blame, and nothing changes. And the airport's actually a really good example of what's wrong with the whole system as it is right now.
We're almost at the top of the hour, and I just want to finish up with one thing. Okanagan Transit Alliance has a meeting with the Minister of Transportation, Minister Fleming, on, is it the 26th, Kirsten? Yeah. And so what we would like is as many sign-ons to the open letter and the petition so that we can actually hand those over to Minister Fleming on the 26th. So, if you are part of an organization like, Interior Health, Desiree, or any other companies that, would be favorable to promoting better transit as outlined in our public letter, please make a push to ask them to sign it. And that's going to be one of our main pushes over the next week, in addition to, as I say, waiting for the agenda to be released this afternoon to see what the resolution wording is regarding the 18 and under free fares, because also we would like people to write in supporting council, writing a letter of support. And if in fact, sometimes councillors get antsy and they say, oh, let's maybe do a report and find out what this will cost, not saying that will be the case in this particular instance, but if there's something like that mentioned, well, we don't need a study to send a letter of support to the province for the province to provide free transit. That would be more costly and we'd be wasting taxpayer money. So just think of all the things that we've mentioned today where it's more expensive to do one thing versus another, and send letters to council. And pretty much we are at the top of the hour. So has anyone got anything else they'd really like to say before we close off?
Great discussion.
Yeah.
Saying nothing, I'm going to stop the recording.